November 3, 2008, Langley, Virginia, 7:22 a.m. A senior CIA officer named Kevin Nicholson badges through security like he has every morning for 11 years. Blue lanyard, government ID, coffee in hand. What his colleagues don't know, what the CIA doesn't know, is that inside his briefcase are classified documents describing the exact location of 3 active weapons caches the agency has been building across Eastern Europe for the past 4 years. By tonight, those documents will be photographed, encrypted, and transmitted to a black market arms broker operating out of Sofia, Bulgaria. Nicholson isn't selling secrets for ideology. He isn't working for a foreign government. He is doing it for one reason: the $340,000 sitting in a Dubai account that gets larger every single time he walks out of Langley with something worth selling. How does a CIA officer run a black market weapons operation from inside the most secretive intelligence agency on Earth and nearly get away with it completely? Kevin Nicholson joined the CIA in 1997, fresh out of Georgetown, with a degree in international relations and a security clearance that took 14 months to obtain. He speaks 4 languages. He has spent a decade running assets across Eastern Europe, meeting informants in parking garages, managing drop sites in Budapest and Warsaw, building the kind of operational network that takes years to construct and seconds to destroy. He is, by every internal measure, exactly the kind of officer the agency needs. He is also exactly the kind of officer the agency never checks. This is the thing about trust inside an intelligence organization that nobody talks about publicly. The CIA spends extraordinary resources vetting new recruits. Polygraphs, background investigations, psychological evaluations that take over a year to complete. What it spends considerably less time doing is continuously monitoring the people who have already passed. Officers with a decade of clean performance reviews, no financial red flags, and consistent operational success exist in an institutional blind spot. They have already been trusted. The question of whether they should still be trusted gets asked far less frequently than it should. Nicholson understands this blind spot with the precision of someone who spent his career exploiting similar gaps in other organizations on behalf of the CIA. The weapons program he begins accessing in 2006 is a classified post-Cold War initiative, the agency maintaining strategic caches of small arms, ammunition, and portable military equipment across Eastern European countries that had recently joined NATO. The official purpose is contingency planning. If a crisis erupts in the region requiring rapid response, these caches provide immediate material support without the delays of official military logistics. Each cache contains rifles, ammunition, night vision equipment, communications hardware, and in some locations portable anti-tank weapons. The combined value of the program across all locations runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The locations are classified above top secret. Access to the documentation describing them is restricted to a small group of officers with direct operational responsibility. Nicholson is one of those officers. His first sale is small: a single cache location, a facility outside Bucharest containing a relatively modest inventory. He photographs the relevant documents during a routine access session, reduces the images to an encrypted file smaller than a standard email attachment, and passes the package to his contact through a dead drop in Vienna during a scheduled operational trip that provides perfect cover for the meeting. The payment arrives in his Dubai account 4 days later, $40,000 for 30 seconds of photography. You see, he sits in his Vienna hotel room looking at the transfer confirmation on his laptop and does the arithmetic that will define the next 2 years of his life. The CIA maintains over 40 such caches across the region. He has authorized access to documentation on most of them. If $40,000 is what one location is worth to the right buyer, what is the entire program worth? He closes the laptop, orders room service, sleeps 8 hours. The next morning, he flies back to Langley and badges through security like he does every morning. Blue lanyard, government ID, coffee in hand. The buyer is a man Nicholson knows only as Petrov, a Bulgarian national operating through a network of shell companies registered across Cyprus, Malta, and the UAE that the CIA itself had investigated 3 years earlier without producing enough evidence for prosecution. Petrov is not an ideologue. He is not working for a hostile government in any direct sense. He is a commercial arms broker whose clients include insurgent groups, regional militias, corrupt military officials in 3 countries, and a rotating roster of buyers whose identities Nicholson deliberately avoids learning. What Nicholson sells him is not weapons directly. It is access. The precise locations, inventory details, and security arrangements of CIA weapons caches that Petrov's clients can then approach through their own channels, or that Petrov can sell upward to buyers with the resources and connections to act on the intelligence. The distinction matters to Nicholson. He is not, in his own framing, arming anyone. He is selling information. What happens with that information is someone else's decision. By early 2007, the arrangement has produced 6 transactions. Total received $280,000. Nicholson has moved the money through 3 separate accounts across Dubai, Liechtenstein, and a small private bank in Cyprus, distributed in amounts designed to stay below automated reporting thresholds in each jurisdiction. He buys nothing with it. No cars, no property, no visible lifestyle change that might prompt a colleague's question or a financial review. The money sits in accounts his wife doesn't know exist, in countries his employer doesn't monitor, waiting for a retirement that is still 6 years away. This is his discipline, and it is remarkable. Intelligence officers who turn are typically caught because success makes them careless. A new car, why a vacation upgrade, a financial pattern that doesn't match a government salary. Nicholson makes none of these mistakes. To every person who knows him, he is a slightly underpaid federal employee driving a 2004 Honda and brown bagging his lunch 3 days a week. At Langley, his performance reviews remain exceptional. His operational network in Eastern Europe continues producing genuine intelligence that his supervisors value. He attends his daughter's soccer games on Saturdays. He coaches a youth basketball team on Thursday evenings. He is a good officer, a good father, and a man who has now sold the locations of 11 CIA weapons caches to a black market broker whose clients include people actively working against American interests in 3 countries. The operation expands in late 2007 when Petrov introduces a secondary buyer, a contact with access to end users in the Middle East willing to pay significantly more for cache locations in specific geographic areas. Nicholson's price per transaction doubles. He photographs more documents. What he doesn't know, what nobody has told him because nobody knows yet, is that one of Petrov's clients has already moved on a cache location Nicholson sold 8 months earlier. A facility outside Krakow is now missing inventory. Polish security services have opened an investigation, and a single inventory discrepancy in a classified facility has just generated a report that will eventually land on a desk at Langley with a question attached to it that nobody there can immediately answer. How does someone know exactly what was there? The Krakow discrepancy sits in a CIA internal audit file for 4 months before anyone connects it to the access logs. This is how intelligence failures actually happen. Not through dramatic moments of sudden realization, but through the slow accumulation of administrative paperwork that nobody is paid to read carefully until something forces the question. A Polish security report mentions missing inventory at a facility whose existence is classified. The report moves through channels. It reaches Langley, it gets filed, 4 months pass. Then a second facility reports anomalies. This one is in Romania. 2 facilities, both missing inventory, both accessed only by personnel with above top secret clearance on the relevant program. Both locations that appear in the documentation logs of the same small group of officers. A counterintelligence analyst named Sarah Chen pulls both files on the same afternoon in March 2008. She is not looking for a pattern. She is doing a routine cross-reference as part of a quarterly review process that most of her colleagues consider the least interesting part of their jobs. She finds a pattern anyway. 6 officers have access to documentation on both compromised facilities. She runs financial background checks on all 6. 5 come back clean. The 6th, Kevin Nicholson, shows a pattern that shouldn't be there. No obvious red flags, no large purchases, no lifestyle inflation. But 3 international wire transfers in amounts just below reporting thresholds, originating from a bank in Cyprus that appears in a separate counterintelligence file as a known money movement vehicle for Eastern European organized crime networks. It is not proof, it is a thread. Chen pulls the thread. Over the next 6 weeks, working with 2 colleagues and a financial crime specialist from the FBI, she builds a map, access logs, travel records, financial transfers, and the operational timeline of the Petrov network that the CIA had investigated 3 years earlier. The map has a center. The center is Kevin Nicholson. On May 14, 2008, counterintelligence places Nicholson under physical surveillance without his knowledge. They watch for 3 weeks. They see nothing actionable. Because Nicholson's operational discipline is genuinely impressive, and because his next scheduled contact with Petrov is still 6 weeks away. But they are watching when he travels to Warsaw in June for what his travel authorization describes as a routine asset meeting. The asset meeting is real. Nicholson runs it professionally and returns clean intelligence to Langley 3 days later. What the surveillance team also observes is a 40-minute gap in his itinerary on the second evening. A walk through the Old Town district that ends at a specific cafe where Nicholson sits alone for 20 minutes, leaves a folded newspaper on the table when he goes, and is followed 11 minutes later by a man whose face matches a photograph in the Petrov network file. The dead drop is photographed from across the street. Nicholson lands at Dulles on June 19th and badges through security at Langley the following morning. Blue lanyard, government ID coffee in hand. 6 counterintelligence officers are watching him do it on closed-circuit monitors in a room he doesn't know exists. They let him go to his desk. Let him log into his computer. Ina let him spend a normal day doing normal work. Then at 4:47 p.m., as he is packing his bag to leave, 2 officers appear at his office door. He looks at their faces and understands immediately. He sits back down in his chair without being asked. The coffee goes cold on his desk while they read him his rights. The arrest of a CIA officer for selling classified weapons, cache locations to a black market arms broker, produces exactly 0 public news coverage for 11 months. This is by design. The CIA's Counterintelligence Division and the Department of Justice spend nearly a year managing the operational damage before any public disclosure, identifying which cache locations have been compromised, assessing which have been accessed by hostile parties, quietly relocating inventory that hasn't yet been targeted, and building a prosecution case that can be tried in federal court without revealing classified details that would cause further harm in open proceedings. Nicholson cooperates, not immediately. His first instinct, the trained intelligence officer's instinct, is to say nothing and let the evidence determine what can be proven. But the Warsaw dead drop photographs are unambiguous. The financial trail, once investigators have the account details his cooperation provides access to, documents 17 transactions across 2 years, totaling $612,000. He negotiates a plea agreement. In exchange for full cooperation, identifying every transaction, every contact point with Petrov's network, and every cache location he disclosed, federal prosecutors agree to a reduced charge structure that carries a maximum sentence of 22 years rather than the life imprisonment that espionage convictions can produce. He is sentenced to 19 years in federal prison. His wife divorces him before the sentencing hearing. His daughter is 11 years old. At the sentencing, Nicholson reads a prepared statement describing his actions as a catastrophic failure of judgment, driven by financial anxiety he had never disclosed to anyone, a period of private financial stress following a failed outside investment that had cost him most of his personal savings, and that he had been too ashamed to address through legitimate channels. The judge listens to the full statement, then sentences him to 19 years anyway. Petrov is indicted in absentia by a federal grand jury. He is never arrested. He continues operating through his shell company network, presumably with a somewhat depleted inventory of CIA facility locations, but an otherwise intact business operation. His current whereabouts are not publicly known. Of the 17 cache locations Nicholson disclosed, 9 were accessed by unknown parties before the CIA's damage assessment was complete. 3 facilities lost significant inventory. The weapons from those facilities have never been fully accounted for. Somewhere in Eastern Europe or possibly beyond it, there are rifles and ammunition, and possibly more that left CIA custody through documents photographed in 30 seconds by a man drinking government coffee and are now in the hands of people whose names do not appear in any federal file. Nicholson is released from federal prison in 2027 under the plea agreement's terms. He will be 58 years old. His daughter will be 30. He will not be eligible to hold a security clearance again. The CIA revised its continuous monitoring protocols for officers with existing clearances in 2010, implementing regular financial reviews, more frequent polygraph requirements, and automated flagging systems for international financial activity connected to known money movement networks. The barn door, as barn doors tend to be, was secured after the horse had left. But here's the thing that stays with everyone who studies this case. Nicholson never believed he would get caught, not because he was arrogant. He was too professionally disciplined for arrogance, but because the system that trained him to find gaps in other organizations had never seriously taught him to consider that someone might be looking for the same gaps in him. He spent 11 years learning to see blind spots. He just never looked for his own.